In conversation with Ian Williamson. Ian M. Williamson graduated from the University of Liverpool in 2015 after studying history and Hispanic studies, where his historical interests were based largely in 20th century world politics. The studies fostered a lifelong intrigue in what might have been a provided an insightful basis for this alternate history narrative. Ian lives in Liverpool. And in today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Ian Williamson. How are you doing today, Ian?
I'm good, thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing very fine too. It's quite lovely, really, to have you here. I'm excited we're here to sit and have a conversation about the name of the rich, which I find to be quite beautiful, really. So thank you once again for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, Heian, I need to first say that your book, In the Name of the Rich, it's quite lovely, quite intriguing, and quite interesting to me. Well, I had to check it up on your website and on Amazon, and I find it to be quite amazing based on the themes it touched, based on the subject lines it asked to expand on. And that got me curious, got me, thinking and say, I would love to ask you. How did this book come to be? What inspired the making of it? How did you come up with the name, even the name of the rich? And just tell us about the background, the foundation of the making of the book.
It began obviously with university, having studied
Yeah,
20th century politics. I mean, through school as well. It's the Second World War is a big part of just English education. So,
yeah,
like GCSEs, college, university, it was a theme I kept going back to because it was just the part that fascinated me the most. From anything I did in history, it was always this 20th century politics and how you
yeah,
could relate it to modern day politics, and I always kept going back to it. So having kind of lived in that time period through my studies, I then found myself going to books like The Man in the High Castle, Fatherland, SSGB, and this question of what if the Nazis had won? And when you get down into like the details of it, there are moments where it really turned on like a hairpin, and it could have gone the other way. So it was always a question of what if that had happened? What if this person had done that, made that decision? Could it have
yeah.
influenced the outcome of the war? And then when you read the literature, it's like,
Mm.
oh, people have actually written about this. People have debated this topic since the war itself. There were books written during the war that
Yeah,
touched on this topic.
yeah,
So having read those books, I started to ask myself like, what? How do I think it would have happened? How do I think like this decision could have led to this outcome?
yeah.
But what I found was none of the books ever touched on the perspective of a character who has been raised under the regime. So usually the characters are people who are against the regime. They are rebels against the Third Reich. They are
Mm.
inevitably, in some way or another, going to either undermine or try to overthrow
Yeah,
National Socialism and save the world from a like continued dystopian future. The idea I thought of was to create a narrative from the perspective of a character who's been raised under National Socialism during this time. So we find ourselves in 1969 in London.
mm.
So it's 30 years after the war, and
Wow,
this character is 29 years old. So he's been raised
wow.
under National Socialism, under the regime. He was raised in a boarding school, and he's been indoctrinated under National Socialism. So from that
Mm.
perspective of how do I think someone my age would have been impacted by living under Nazi rule, and
Mm.
really diving into that, the impact of the propaganda and the indoctrination. I'd never seen anything written from that perspective, like the other side of the perspective. And when I came up
Wow.
with that idea of this might actually be unique, and it's so difficult to think of something
Yeah.
that is unique. It's everyone always says there are no new ideas, even that might have something new to say on the topic.
Mm.
Was the moment where I was like, okay, this is something I might actually be able to try and see where I end up. So that was the major inception
Mm.
for actually writing the book.
I love your take on that, really. I love the fact that you had to take us back into the foundation, and the fact that you had to study, your study in the university kind of inspired the making of the book as
Mm.
well. And your conversation around that is quite beautiful, quite fun to me, really. That's quite commendable, really. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And also, hey, and I'd like to ask you, What kind of research did you undertake to ensure historical accuracy while also building a believable alternate timeline in your book?
The foundation for the research was there already, having studied it for so long. It
Oh,
felt like I've always wanted to write. I've always been a writer. I've always had that itch to create,
mm,
but I can't play a musical instrument. I can't sing. I can't draw. I can't do anything like that. So it was, for
yeah.
me, writing became my creative outlet. So it felt like a really natural progression to go from studying it to writing about it.
Mm,
So I had that basic foundation of I know
mm,
a lot about. I mean, there's always more to learn. There's so much to go back into, but I knew a good amount to really start from somewhere. I wasn't
yeah.
starting from zero. The amount of research it then takes to actually build a alternate history that feels realistic and grounded and gritty and
Mm, yeah.
like plausible was tremendous. The I
Wow.
It's not something I would have been able to do without the internet. It really isn't.
You
The
know,
thought of having to go to a library and
yeah.
collecting several books and like writing everything down and going back home to type it all
Absolutely.
up. And I don't think I would have had the capacity to be able to actually do something like that. Especially if
Mm,
you're like, okay, I need this certain piece of information for this one little tiny bit that
yeah.
doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but will really
Absolutely.
set a plausible narrative.
Mm,
To go and find that one individual piece of information in a library full of books would have where'd you start? Whereas with the joys of the internet, it's right at your fingertips. I said to someone, I got to the point where I was trying to research the weather on the English Channel in June 1943 to try and
yeah.
see if it would have been plausible on this specific day for
Mm,
the Nazis to try and invade mainland Europe, mainland
mm,
Britain. I was like, I think it might have gone too far now. This might not matter, but that's like the level of detail I was really trying to get to really just make sure it's set
mm.
in a grounded reality.
Absolutely. That's amazing, really. I love your take on that. It's quite lovely to get to know about some of the research you undertook while ensuring historical accuracy in the book. Now, I wanted to ask you because, you study history and Hispanic study in the University of Liverpool. I wanted to ask you, how did your course at the university inspired or affected the making of this book, if in any way it could not necessarily be about this book, it could be your storytelling, it could be some of the things you utilize even in the book, it could be your characterization, it could be your writing style. Just wanted to ask you, how did your profession or your career or the fact that you had to study history and Hispanic study in Liverpool, how does it influence the making of this book? It just popped up in my head and I felt I should ask you.
Yeah, sure. It's if nothing else, being a history student, you just do a lot of writing.
Yeah,
If nothing else, and over that time, I saw my own writing style start to develop a little bit.
yeah.
Especially when you're doing several essays every semester,
Mm,
you start to feel your own writing style building, and you get lots of feedback on just structure and grammar and this and that. So just the actual process of learning how to write
mm,
just in a better style did help a lot when I started. When I started actually trying to write a novel,
yeah.
the and there's quite a heavy influence. Talking about the Hispanic studies, there's quite a
Mm,
heavy influence of like the Spanish Civil War, which I do think came straight from having studied about Spain specifically during that
yeah.
part of the degree.
Yeah.
It felt natural to bring that into the narrative when otherwise I don't know if I would have naturally found that element.
Yeah.
So that all of a sudden became a big part, and there's a couple of Spanish characters who are really big parts of the
Mm,
plot, and that came about because I'd spent so long again immersed in
mm,
that culture. Which again, I don't know if I ever would have got to that point without it. So it did have a lot of influence.
yeah, absolutely. That's quite amazing to know, really. I love your take on that. Thank you. Thank you for, giving an answer to that. That's quite beautiful and quite helpful. And also, Ian, would you like to give us an actual, maybe not giving too much information away actually,
Yeah,
but what the plot, the subject lines, and some of the themes would expand while picking up the book, if possible?
yeah, sure. So we found ourselves in London in 1969. It's about almost 30 years after the end of what I've called the Second Great War, where the
Mm.
Nazis were victorious. So the world's divided into three spheres of influence. Basically, you've got the Nazis with Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia. You've got the Japanese Empire in the east with Southeast Asia and larger parts of East Asia. And then the United States still exists with their sphere of influence as North and South America.
Mm.
So we find ourselves in this world where the Nazis have won the Second World War and they are in charge of Great Britain. Now, so that's the setting to the plot. The plot itself revolves around a young detective sergeant in the Metropolitan Police named John Highsmith, who has been tasked with, as part of a task force, to bring about the end of a new fashionable drug called Yonder, which is
Mm.
being used mostly by working class British citizens who, because they've never been able to rise up physically against National Socialism, they're using this drug to escape spiritually from like
Mm.
what they perceive to be this prison of Nazi-occupied late 1960s Great Britain. And
Yeah.
obviously, the regime isn't particularly happy about this, so they've set
Yes.
up task forces within different police departments to try and stamp it out. And that's what John is. That's what he's dedicating his time to. Now, so that's the plot. The what I'm calling the unique selling point
Yeah.
of this narrative is the fact that John Highsmith has been raised under National Socialism. So he's 29 years old. He
Mm.
was born kind of during the war, and then afterwards he's been raised in a board school under the regime. So he is a National Socialist. He is a card carrying, flag waving Nazi,
Mm.
basically. And the whole idea of writing the narrative from this perspective is to really try and break down these themes of what we would now call fake news, basically.
Mm.
How these themes of propaganda and indoctrination
Yeah.
would really start to, how they would affect someone as a young British man.
Mm.
And then obviously we would then build into the themes of like the fragility of democracy, the rise of totalitarianism,
Mm.
but it's really trying to dig into this different perspective. And as a character, I spent a lot of time trying to make him feel real and accessible. So he's a father to be. He's kind. He's empathetic. He's really trying to do his job as a police officer to the best of his ability to protect society, what he deems to be a threat. But at the same time, he has these really dark, horrific ideologies that would come with being raised under National Socialism.
Mm.
And it's trying to pull the reader back and forth and trying to really play with your sympathies right until the last line of the book of he's a nice person, but every so often it's dropped in that don't forget he is a Nazi, and in another book he would be the bad guy.
Mm.
And what I've really enjoyed is people who've read it really sympathise with the character
Mm.
and really find it difficult to try and pull apart those two, like this duality of
Mm.
the good guy, the bad guy, the empathetic man, and the basically the Nazi. So it's been really fun getting responses from it and finding out what people think.
That's quite amazing, really. I love your take on that. And while you're speaking, it got me having so many things going through my head. And I just wanted to ask you, how would you describe your protagonist? How would if you had to use a particular word, or if there should be a nice thing for you to say about your protagonist, your main character, and if there should be a bad thing you would love to say about your protagonist and main character, how would you describe? What are some of the positive things you would say about him or her, and some of the negative you would say? How would you describe your protagonist in terms of the features and characteristics that they possess as a person?
What I tried to do, I tried to use a lot of my own like anxieties and worries and hopes
Oh.
and dreams for the future in the character. So there's
Interesting.
certain parts where there's certain parts where he stops and like we get to see how he's anxious from day
Mm.
to day, like certain situations, how he's trying to react to difficult moments during his job as a police officer. Okay, so there's a part later on where he's talking about the fact that he's a father to be, and he
Yeah,
finds it really difficult to like engage with young children. He doesn't know what to say or how to act. That's an
yeah,
anxiety I've always had. Like so,
absolutely.
it's it's using something I know and
Mm.
feel to
Yeah.
try and make this character feel real. who to me, as the writer, I
Mm,
can use again my own uncertainties, or he hopes to like travel with his future family and see parts of the world, and
mm,
it's really trying to build a character who feels realistic and
yeah,
empathetic. He's kind. He's trying to help people. He's trying to do his job to the best of his ability. He really bounces up against other police officers when they
yeah.
act out violently. So it's trying to again build that one side of the character to then really drop. Every so often the fact that this ideology, this don't forget he is a Nazi, he has very dark beliefs that again would come with being indoctrinated by National Socialism. These are things that
Wow.
people thought, these are things that did happen. And it's using again that, trying to really pull that historical context
Mm,
into this new character.
mm,
Like, and trying to make someone who's not just a one note, because very often the Nazi in any narrative is a very one note bad guy. And there's a specific character in the book who is much more of a straightforward, he's not a nice guy. And it's again, it compares like trying to make someone feel real
mm,
against maybe this other fella who isn't. Just trying to separate these two different parts and really get on, really
mm.
tug at people's sympathies.
That's interesting, really. I love your take on that. I mean, the question just popped up in my head, and I feel I should ask you. So thank you very much for giving answer to that. And also, Ian, your setting always feels so vivid, so clear, so distinctive in nature. I wanted to ask you, how do you bring them to life on the page? Are there any tricks? Are there any secrets? Are there any techniques that you rely on?
So again, grounding the settings in the historical setting was
Mm,
the main part, and making sure they obviously wasn't alive in 1969. So trying to research the aesthetic of how London might
yeah.
have felt, uh, the different like types of building, how like areas were set
Mm,
out. I got old maps of London up from before the war so that I could plot where I thought they would have been by 1969, how the war might have affected it, how National
yeah.
Socialism would have affected it, just the area. And it was trying to, again, bring out the feeling of each setting. I spent a long time on the description of how
Mm,
each place feels, how it smells, how it looks, and then how it
absolutely.
affects the main character, how
Yeah.
he feels in each area. Is he scared, anxious, happy to be there,
Mm,
sad, excited, and trying to make everything connect back into his own personality. And then for a lot of it, I based different settings on my own memories. So a lot of the houses we visit during the narrative,
mm.
they're houses I've been to. There's a house in the second chapter which is the layout of my grandmother's old house, like
Oh.
really steep carpeted stairs and like narrow corridor, and the layout is
Mm.
somewhere I know well, so I could really, it felt easy to describe it.
Wow.
And then obviously then you use your imagination to just build on that and open it up. So there was a lot of my own memories went into trying to create structures that and in settings that feel real.
Mm. Oh, wow. That's quite beautiful as well. I love your take on that. And I can go on and on and on and on and on with this, really. Your response to these questions are quite beautiful. Before I go on, I'd like you to show the book to the camera. I'm not sure we've
Yeah,
shown
sure.
it so far. So let's
Yeah.
see what it
So
looks like.
it's you see that?
Yeah, closer, much closer. No, closer to the camera.
Oh,
Yeah.
there we go. That's the
Yeah.
one.
In the
So it's
name of the rich.
so it's got
Quite beautiful
a
cover.
UV spot
Quite
on it. So
voluminous.
it's yeah. So it's there's a UV spot on the text which kind of makes it really shine in the sunlight. I mean, there's not a lot of sunlight today, so it's not working very well, but it just catches the light lovely, and
Yeah.
like the sides put the
Ah,
same
it's
on it.
so
You can see
thick.
it just about. But it's I never really knew in terms of the cover. So
Oh.
I worked with Troubadour Publishing to
Oh, I know
self-publish
that.
the novel, and they did the cover for me. So I gave them the context and just a couple of ideas of maybe what I'd like to see on it, and they
Mm.
just took it and ran with it. And I I didn't know what I wanted the cover to be
Yeah.
until I saw it. I was like, that's it. That's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to be. The use of the black and the white and the red, like the dark background, and just Big Ben in the corner, just to make sure like the setting's obvious.
Yeah.
It just it somehow perfectly captured the tone of the
Mm.
whole narrative
Oh,
in a
wow.
front cover, and it was like, yeah, no, that's exactly what I wanted it to be. But I never would have, I never
Yeah.
would have guessed that that was what it would have come out like.
That's quite beautiful to know, really. I love the sound of that. That's quite great and quite wholesome. Thank you for sharing. And also, hey, you've written both prose and poetry. And I find that to be quite amazing with the fact that you've explored different genres of literature, which is quite beautiful, really. I have only written so far on the genre of poetry. Sometimes when it comes to writing prose or novels, it seems to me to be a lot of work because I have to sit down, craft sentences together, to make paragraph, to make a whole lot chapters and on and on and on. It's really a lot of work, really. One of the reasons why I find novelists to be quite like it's a lot of work, and you guys are doing a lot and quite commendable, even. Yeah, I love to give you guys the flowers. You deserve it. Yeah, but then, you've written both prose and poetry, which I find to be quite dynamic, really. Now, I wanted to ask you, how does your creative mindset shift between these two forms, even anyway?
It's basically what you've just said. It's what I like. What I enjoy about poetry
Mm,
is it's far more playful.
mm,
It's because it's well, the poems I've written in much shorter form as well. So it's
mm,
I enjoy the process of kind of building a poem like a jigsaw.
mm,
So you have like that kernel of an idea. I'm going to write something about this, and you start just getting lines and verses and little bits on the page. Because
yeah.
when I've been doing poetry myself, I've freehanded, so I've been
Mm.
writing it with just pen and paper, and
Oh,
it's fun to kind of just get some bits on the page, and it's okay. I like that. Let's
yeah.
put that at the start, and then let's build onto that, and this can go there, and slot
Yeah,
that in there, and it's like
absolutely.
a puzzle,
Yeah.
and you get the ideas on the page, and it kind of just starts to build into a coherent piece of poetry.
Mm,
When I was writing the book, I got very, very stuck on, I should say, sentence structure,
mm,
trying to keep it pacey, short sentences followed by longer sentences with a semicolon, and the paragraph's got to be the right length. And
mm,
I really got bogged down in the whole trying to make it
mm.
read well. Where I was found with poetry, because it is so playful, it's quite liberating to not have to worry so painfully about the
Mm,
exact like sentence structure and the grammar, and you're
yeah,
allowed to be more creative. And if after, because I got into it after I'd finished the book,
yeah,
and I found it very liberating, especially being shorter.
mm,
There was always a fear with the book where I'd spent some like it took me 8 years to write it, start to finish, and I'd spent so
yeah,
long on it. It was if I don't finish that, that's a lot of time to have
yeah,
put into something to not finish.
yeah,
Whereas with a short form poem, if you spend a couple of hours on something, I think that's not really going anywhere.
yeah,
It's again liberating to be able to say, right, I'm going to leave that for now.
mm,
Maybe take elements out of it and move it somewhere else, but
yeah,
I can just leave that where it is, and I don't feel like I've lost a lot of time to it.
yeah, absolutely. That's quite amazing, real. I love your take on that. And your answer to that want to make me to go ahead and talk about readers' feedbacks. Because one of
Mm,
the things that intrigue me and interests me most about being a writer is the fact of sitting back and listening to readers' feedbacks. You may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex and quite interesting as well is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. And sometimes some readers might get the message intended by the author. Sometimes they might not get the message intended by the author. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. And as someone who has written in both, genre in prose and poetry, you would agree with me. This is very popular and common in terms of poetry, whereby you intend a particular meaning for a line and stanza, and someone else has read it and interpreted it quite differently than what you intended. I'm like, I never meant it that way, really. But anyway, so it's quite fine. It's quite fine. It's quite fine with your feedback and etc. So it's always leave me thinking like this is quite a different and quite beautiful stance. But then I wanted to ask you as a writer, how do you feel? How do you react? How does it make you feel when you sit back and watch readers interpret your works quite differently than what you intended or close to what you intended? Or when you begin to get the iris of feedbacks and responses, how does it make you feel as a storyteller and poet?
It's a lot of fun to really be able to debate
Yeah,
what something
debate.
means. Like I'm in a book club. I go every couple of weeks, and just that having that group of people come together and everyone's got a slightly different opinion, even if they're not
Yeah,
miles away. Everyone's interpreted everything a little bit differently, and it's just fun. It's with any
yeah,
sort, as you say, with any sort of art, be it literature, poetry,
yeah,
cinema, music. Someone else might have a completely different interpretation to
yeah.
what either I intended as the writer or what someone else feels as a reader.
Mm,
So I really enjoy that conversation. Now, I think the general theme of like what I'm trying to put across in the name of the Reich,
mm,
I went to pains to kind of hammer home what the like the moral message is supposed to be, or what what I'm intending to say. But it still
mm,
leaves it very open for interpretation. My friend is an English teacher in a secondary
yeah,
school, and she actually taught the first chapter to
mm,
a GCSE class. They do a project on like the first chapter of different books, and she actually taught it.
mm,
And there's an element in there where, in the first chapter, the main character, John Highsmith, he's been on the firing range and he's not done
mm,
particularly well. And it says, the part of the book says he exits the room with the feigned
yeah,
confidence of an accomplished marksman.
mm,
And I wrote that as in like, so he's insecure, he's anxious, he's trying to hide it from everybody else. A little bit of
yeah,
an element maybe of toxic masculinity, trying to
mm,
look
yeah,
better than he is.
yeah,
And so she put this to the class and said to him, what do you think this means?
yeah,
And I think all of them came up with that, except
yeah,
for one person who came back and said, oh, he's a liar. He's deceitful. He can't be
mm,
trusted. I was like, just that slight turn
mm,
on how you interpret it, all of a sudden that character becomes completely different. And it's a
absolutely.
it's a perfectly valid take on it. And that continues through the book of he's a
Yeah,
very unreliable narrator.
yeah,
You can't trust what he's thinking or saying because he's been so deeply indoctrinated in Nazism.
absolutely. Yeah,
And just that slight turn on the take was like, that's amazing. It's like it's not what I was thinking when I wrote it, but it's a perfectly valid interpretation of just
absolutely.
that one sentence. And it's
Yeah,
like, that's fantastic. That's so it's so brilliant to see someone
yeah,
like interpret my own work like that. It was really it was really interesting to read all the different responses.
yeah. That's quite amazing, really. I mean, I love your response. I love your answers to this question. They sound to me to be quite fun, and I can go on and on and on and on and on, really. Quite beautiful responses you've got. Quite educative as well as instructive. Beautiful, really. Thank you. Now, apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
I have started a sequel to In the Name of the Reich.
Interesting.
It's a world I'd like to continue working in and keep building on the characters and the different settings.
Mm,
But I've got like the first chapter and a half. I think I wrote it about getting close to 12 months ago now. But when
mm,
it really started amping up with In the Name of the Reich, and I had to get the last edit in, and I was trying to like settle on the cover design and
mm,
the copy, the proof edit, sorry, and all then starting the marketing, trying to really sell it and find a little space
yeah,
in the uh, in the industry for it to kind of find a spotlight. I've
yeah,
not had time to go back to it just yet and
mm,
really focus on the next part of the story. I'm
yeah.
starting to really get that itch again for
Oh, wow.
to write. I'm really excited to
Oh,
carry on with it, but for the time being, I need to focus on trying to get this in front of as
mm,
many eyes as possible, and then I can work on the next part. But that would be my next project would be to really expand on this world and change the setting, change some of the characters, and really start to
mm.
delve further into where I think the story's going to go.
Wow. That's quite amazing, really. It sounds like you've got a lot ongoing. I hope you find some times to sleep. I hope
It's
so.
trying to trying to write books and work full time and promote all on Instagram. Like Instagram itself, like a part time job.
Oh, absolutely. It
It's
can be.
yeah,
Social media is a whole
it's
lot, really. Sometimes
oh yeah,
it's a lot to
it's
catch up with it. So even
yeah,
even myself, sometimes when I feel like, oh, I need to post this, I need to post that. Well, we have social media managers, yeah. But then on my own personal post, I'm like, oh geez, I've not been posting on Twitter, I've not been posting on this. And I just don't really feel it is the right time to give somebody else my account to be managing it for me. I don't think I would love to do that currently. But then it's a lot to catch up with social media. Because I love to feel like there should be a particular space for myself on social media where I can be messaged directly. It could take me a long time to reply, yeah. But I love to, just have one for myself while the other ones are being handled by someone else. But then it's a lot catching up with social media.
it's an awful lot. It is like a part time job sometimes trying to maintain and even just thinking of content. Like, I
Yeah,
need to post something today. What am I going to post? Like, I have
yeah,
no idea what I can post. Trying to think of something again a
it's a
little bit
lot.
different, a little bit original.
Yeah,
It's a lot to maintain. So it's
yeah,
finding that little bit of time to
yeah,
really settle in again and start writing.
yeah,
Because I don't want to bait. I don't want to have 1 hour here, an hour there. Because
yeah,
I'm never going to get into the flow. I
yeah,
really want to be able to carve out some real time, which at the
yeah.
minute it's just there aren't enough hours in the day.
Yeah, and another thing I feel about it is that it can be very rewarding if you can find a time to dedicate your time to social media. It can be very rewarding if you dedicate your time to building an audience, to engaging with followers and followings. Because I do that many years ago. Yeah, see, sometimes I feel like okay, because my social media pages, both IG and Facebook, were at a point disabled, so I'm going back to build it. But so on IG, for instance. I was like, I can actually grow my following within a short while back to maybe over 1,000, etc. Well, it's just about me dedicating a particular. If I dedicate 2 weeks to this, it is possible in 2 weeks, yeah,
Yeah,
because I know how I do it, yeah, very fastly, etc. But then it's a whole lot of time. And again, one thing about it, if you did very dedicated to it, it can be very rewarding because people love it when you're checking back on them, when you leaving a comment on their post, when you're
yeah,
engaging with their content, when you like or love or do this, etc. So it's a lot. It can be very rewarding, but then it takes a lot of time. And I think this is why most company have social media manager because they think
yeah.
it's
Oh, as
it's a
that's
whole
the
lot of work.
motivation. The moment I've got the following and the time to
Yeah,
be able to
yeah,
pay someone to do it, you'd be like, "Yep, that's yours. That's fine. You can do
yeah,
that."
yeah,
It's so much. It's so much work to
yeah. But
stay
beauty,
engaged and keep up to date. But it is
absolutely
like the book community on Instagram is it's fantastic. It's
fantastic.
so
Even on
supportive and
Facebook, it's fantastic. Yeah,
yeah, it is a really good place to be.
yeah,
And it's fun to just engage with people and
absolutely. It is.
have pro real conversations. In the name of the right was launching. I
Mm,
said like, okay, I'm looking to like try and build content with people and get people reading it and reviewing it, and the response was amazing.
mm,
So
yeah,
it is it's a really nice community.
absolutely. It is.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I wanted to ask you, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for writers who are still struggling with publishing a book? Also, where can readers get a copy of your books from?
So in terms of publishing, I did initially try the traditional publishing route, but
Yeah,
the market is so saturated now because it's not compared to say 50 years ago when
yeah,
you were limited to you need a typewriter to do this or you need to
yeah,
and get someone to type it for you because
yeah,
everyone can now just enjoy writing.
yeah,
There are so many books. It's trying to carve out that little piece of the tradition, like trying to get an agent in the first place is I can't imagine the number of submissions an agent must get every single day. But
yeah,
trying to get someone's attention
yeah,
like that is so difficult. I think I ended up with about 30 rejections in my inbox. Like
mm,
that's okay, that's fine.
wow,
That's when I thought I'd put because I'd put so much time into it.
yeah,
I didn't want to just leave it to gather dust on a USB stick or on a laptop.
absolutely, yeah,
So like, okay, I need to self-publish this and see if I can go it alone.
mm,
So I'd never say to someone, don't bother trying to publish traditionally because it
Wow.
happens. People do get deals still, but there's
Mm.
always a backup of the traditional publishing market is sorry, the self-publishing market is
Yeah.
it's growing so quickly
Oh, wow.
and it's becoming so advanced that there is another option.
Mm.
All I would say on that point is take time to really research and find the right people for yourself, because there are so many different means and ways to go about it.
Yeah.
You've really got to find someone you're comfortable
Yeah.
giving a piece of your own work to, because it takes so long to create these things.
Yeah.
You don't just kind of want to throw it out into the world and see what happens.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to find Troubadour and settle on working with them, but it's not something I've ever regretted ever since I signed up with them. They've spent a lot
Yeah.
of time and effort making the book it feels traditional. It feels like it's been professionally published.
Yeah.
It's something people always say to me when they first like get hold of it. It feels real. I
Yeah.
think people have a certain perception of how a self-published book is going to feel, and like
Yeah.
it kind
Yeah.
of feels like a school textbook
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But everyone said like it feels like it's come off the shelf of a bookshop, and like the cover is so professionally made. The UV spot really works. Even the
Yeah.
paper feels expensive.
Yeah.
It's really like crisp white paper, which
Yeah.
is what I wasn't expecting. So anyone looking at publishing, I'd always say, like, particularly with the self-publishing, you've really got to research and think about where you want to take your
Mm.
work in terms
Yeah.
of where people can get it. In the
Yeah.
UK, well, if you live in Liverpool, it's in a
Yeah.
few independent bookshops now.
Yeah.
So it is in a couple of bookshops, and it is in the actual Waterstones in Liverpool city centre, which was that was a big achievement to actually get it in a real like
Wow.
these real brick and mortar bookshops. And
Wow.
but I know a few people have asked about can
Mm.
they get it, particularly in the United States. I know the postage is astronomical.
Yeah.
I'm looking at different ways maybe to do some print on demand, but that's a quite an advanced step in what I'm planning. So for the
Yeah.
time being, it's on it's on Amazon as like to buy as an ebook. It's on the Kindle Unlimited to download.
Yeah.
So it is still accessible, but trying to get physical copies outside of Britain at the moment is probably going to be quite expensive.
Yeah, that's interesting, really. Thank you so much for your advice. And I'm hopeful that viewers, even including myself, would love to utilize it. And I also left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Ian M. Williamson's books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also on other platforms. I also left a link to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Ian, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I'm also this is more than awesome, very great, quite excited and lovely having this conversation with you around your beautiful titles. Thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been excellent, and the work you guys do is particularly for someone like myself who is so new to this, so green. So trying to find just a little spotlight just to be like, it's
Yeah,
here, it
I'll
exists.
get it.
It means an awful lot to be able to engage with yourselves. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really.